Okay, guys, today is March 20th, 2020. This is going to be our third video.
It's our third video, and if you don't know what we're doing, we are making kind of a daily diary while we're quarantined in our homes here in Puerto Rico. And what's unique about this is the virus is kind of just now really gaining momentum in the United States. And so we thought it would be interesting to share all the crazy thoughts and what we're dealing with being locked down in our home and all the media and everything, so that we can look back on it maybe years from now, maybe decades from now, and have a better understanding of like what our mental state of mind was
as it deteriorates.
And I can tell you from the first two episodes, it's not looking good.
No, it's not looking good right now. I'll give you a quick update on numbers. I think yesterday we had right under 10,000 deaths. And now we have 11,305 deaths as I am recording this at 5 p.m. today. I believe yesterday was the first day that we had over 1,000 deaths in a day. And so far it appears that we are doubling the amount of deaths every 4 to 5 days. So in the next 3 days, we will be over 2,000. And then 4 or 5 more days after that, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000 per day.
Yeah.
If this continues.
So I made a chart and I divided it up every 5 days, because a couple days ago, 4 or 5 days, the thought was this thing doubles in deaths every 5 days. Looks like it's a lot more than that. And so on every 5th day is when I'm recording this. So the last one I had was March 15th. I had 64 deaths. And the day before that, or 5 days before that,
this is United States.
United States. On March 10th, I had recorded from the media that we had 32 deaths and then 64. It looked like it was doubling, right? So
every 5 days.
Every 5 days. So from March 15th, we went to 64 to today. The 20th is the first time I can record. 233 deaths today. That is 4 times as many. That's not doubling. That's almost 4 times as many. And I guess you would expect that when our recording of the numbers have been really skewed. Like, we're not doing tests.
We are more now.
But you would expect there to be a skew in data early on rather than later. But I didn't expect it to go up 4 times in one recorded period for me.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into this video, I just want to mention that we actually started a Patreon account maybe years ago, but we never activated it because we always felt like, it's kind of weird asking for money when we're making ad revenue, affiliate revenue, tutorial revenue. Well, as you can imagine, these videos have nothing to do with photography or Fstoppers at all.
Right.
So far, we haven't even posted these on Fstoppers. I'm not sure if we will or not. But these videos are taking us like 8 hours to produce. Like with the watching and recording all the news clips and everything.
The exporting, the video last night I did, it took like a good hour and a half to export and then another 30 minutes or so to upload. So I was done at midnight, but I still had 2 more hours of just, exporting to get it online.
Yeah, so what time did you go to bed last night?
I went to bed last night at 3:30.
But if anybody would like to donate, we're going to put a link to our Patreon below. And we actually have a specific thank you to someone. We have never publicized that we had a Patreon account. We never really set it up.
Yeah.
But somebody found it last night.
Terrence Cummings found our account, and I just logged into our email, and it was like, hey, you have a Patreon sponsor. And I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
This isn't publicized anywhere.
Yeah, we never thought we were going to do a Patreon. So thank you very much, Terrence, and for everybody who suggested that we do this and who wanted to give us a
few years
bucks a month. Yeah, thank you. One other thing that I want to mention is that I think it would be really interesting for people who are completely out of the loop and people who want to watch this video years from now. I am going to show news headlines while we're talking that may be completely unrelated to what we're talking about. But the idea is that you can kind of see a bunch of stuff that all happened today on March 20th.
Right. So I'm a member of a bunch of WhatsApp groups, you are too, here in the neighborhood, and some of them are just for the guys, and some of them are for medical advice. Like, there's all these different groups, but then one of them I'm in is a investing group that's actually not based here in Puerto Rico. There's a bunch of friends kind of back home. Most of these people I don't know, but it's like 50 people our age, and they're very into like the technical analysis and what the stock market's doing every second. And one of the posts that somebody just made comes from Goldman Sachs. And it says that U.S. jobless claims may reach 2.25 million people next week. So 2.25 million people have already gone into the unemployment office somehow. I guess those are
You
open.
can probably do it online, right?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but that seems like a much higher number than I think what anybody was expecting. I wish I had what the previous number could have been, but you know, like we said yesterday, we're expecting 10 to, you said 60, 70% unemployment. I mean,
At least in the short term. I mean,
it seems that
I
way.
think on paper people think they still have jobs, but you know, if we're stuck inside for 2 months,
Yeah.
people are not going to have jobs when they get back out. They think they're going to have jobs, but if their employers don't have clients anymore,
Yeah.
how are these jobs going to still exist?
And I'm already having trouble now knowing what I've said in these little settings versus what I've said to a bunch of people and my parents. But one of the issues that I'm hearing about is how difficult this process is, because there's still questions on, is the employer paying sick leave or vacation leave to their employees? Is the government paying that? Does the employer need to technically fire somebody so that they're unemployed to get the paycheck? I know a friend, a family member who is in construction, and his boss was like, I will let you work every other week. But where does that put you if you need to make an unemployment claim? You know, there's all these like really
And then there's
complicated
also the
things
question whether unemployment is the same thing as the free helicopter money
the $1,000, yes.
Trump keeps saying he's going to give everyone.
Yeah, nothing seems to be too clear, and maybe it's just because I haven't read that article that the government, I hope, has put out, and I know a lot of my family members don't read it either, and so they're all speculating on what to do. But I've been talking to your wife, and it's the same sort of thing. Like, there's dental hygienists who are walking out of the dental practice saying, I'm not going to work here if you don't shut down. How are they getting the money? Do they qualify for unemployment? Is it the employer's responsibility to pay them? Or is it the employee who has left and is quarantined? Is it their responsibility to get the money from the government? It's just very complicated knowing what this process is going to be for a lot of people.
I know. And they, like, when I watch Trump every day, he's doing another press conference. I'm not getting anything specific. You know, people will ask him specific questions. How much are people getting? Are wealthy people getting the same amount of money as poor people and all these things? And he's like, we're looking into it. Like, don't you worry. We're going to take care of it.
It's going to be a substantial amount.
It's going to be a huge package. We've never seen a package so big. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it.
The analysts are predicting that unemployment numbers could skyrocket next week. By some analysts, say as many as 3 million people applying for unemployment, which would be a historic number in a 1 week spread. So is a $1,000 check going to cut it? Is that going to be?
We're not talking about a $1,000 check. We're talking about much more than that. We're also talking about doing phases. If this doesn't work, we're going to keep doing until we get it going. And frankly, once we get the economy back, and once this enemy is defeated, the invisible enemy, as I call it, once it's defeated, we get the economy back. It's going to all come back to us very quickly. It comes back very quickly. We have a tremendous economy. We do numbers like no other country has ever done before. Number one in the world, if you go back 2 weeks, and still, obviously, but if you go back 2 weeks, number one in the world by far. That money comes back to us very rapidly.
Well, speaking of Trump's little speeches that he does every day, today's the first day I did not watch anything on TV.
Yeah.
I woke up at 9 after going to sleep at 3:30, and I felt exhausted all day. Is that a sign of coronavirus? I don't know. I'm on edge. Like, how is my health doing?
if you went to sleep at 3, then.
But I'm not able to sleep is part of the problem. Like, I'm constantly, my mind is just going, you know, all the time. So I didn't see this, but apparently his doctor, and I'm going to botch his name, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the little short guy that gets up at the podium.
Okay, yeah.
He came out and said something about the anti-malarial drugs may not actually be effective after Trump yesterday spit off all these drugs and said there's good hope. And he says specifically the test sample of people taking hydroxychloroquine out of France was only 36 people. So the study is very small, and I guess what I kind of read that maybe this whole drug was like pitched by Fox News and what's the guy on there?
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson. And so now it's coming back that like this drug may not be working in France at all. So this is the first kind of news that I've heard where the administration has come out and said there are drugs out there that have great promise, and then 24 hours later it sounds like they're saying this actually might not work at all.
Yeah, it was kind of weird watching the press conference today because Trump kept saying things like, we're going to try everything because it can't get any worse than this. That's not exactly what he was saying, but something like that. And then they would ask, he would say, I have a really good feeling about this. I have a really good feeling about this. And then he'd call the doctor up and he'd be like, as a scientist, I am not going to say how I feel about something. I must see the science to know if it's working or not. And we have not been able to do significant tests.
Yep.
And then Trump would be like, but I have a good feeling about it. So
He had a good
who
feeling
knows?
about this going from 0 to 15 to 0 very soon.
Yeah.
Well, it is now at what, 2,000? So it has to go a lot further to get back to 0. Another thing that I just read, Open Table, they're the company that does all of the reservations for restaurants. The median state, maybe out of all the states that they have, the median rate is down 95% for sit-down reservations, which I would expect to be totally in line. Like, who is sitting down at restaurants?
Sure.
Maybe this is alarming because the government and the states have not actually told everybody they need to be quarantined. Like here in Puerto Rico, I would expect it to be 95 or 100% of all reservations are, 0. But it looks like, restaurants are going to be hit the hardest. Like hotels and restaurants are going to be the ones to really look after. Hotels, a lot of those are huge corporations with some kind of reserve, I would hope.
We would hope.
But small little restaurants are going to be the ones, like my favorite barbecue joints back in Charleston. Are they going to be open a year from now if they have to pay mortgages and rent and everything on their properties and people aren't going and doing takeout, It's kind of scary to think where all of the restaurant industry could be. One of my guys in this investing group used to own a restaurant for 11 years. I think I might have said this in the previous video. He says it's horrible. He says the phone calls he's getting, he's like, I am so glad and lucky I got out of the restaurant business 1 year ago almost today. So restaurants are going to be hit really, really hard.
Well, this is a horrible thought to have, but we were talking with another successful photographer recently, and we were just talking about how many photographers, this is our industry, seem very successful on social media, and they're driving the fancy cars, and they got the watch, and it's
They
like
got the image. A lot of photographers, they got the image, and they walk around the trade shows
Right, but it's starting to come out now that they're not very successful, and they have no savings. And so this photographer was just mentioning that, the opportunity, if you can survive this for any business, will be outrageous. I mean, imagine if all the restaurants close down. We're never going to be so bad that people don't want to go out to eat. Maybe we won't want to go out to eat as much for a few years.
Yeah.
But restaurants will certainly come back, and there will always be a need for photographers, maybe not during a quarantine, but people are always going to get married. People are always going to need family portraits. And so if you can weather this storm, business might be great.
Well, we had a good friend back in Charleston who texted us, and it was the most doom and gloom text message I've ever read.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's been a good run. Photography was amazing. And he wasn't speaking like necessarily from himself. It was like from the industry standard.
Like photography as an industry is done forever. No one will ever pay this amount of money again. It will never be a legitimate business again. We all need to find real jobs now. And he was like, I hope you guys have another plan. And I was thinking like, I think I'm going to be okay eventually,
Yeah, and like you said, there's always a need to create images. And like you said, maybe it just removes all the people that are kind of doing this part-time and just barely getting by. And then in a year from now, only the best have survived, and the people that know how to run a business, the best will survive. And then eventually people get back into it. But, if you have I worry about the people that have the big studios.
Absolutely.
They have the big spaces. I mean, we know
Big
a lot
overhead.
of photographers that, they have 10 employees.
Yeah.
And they have a huge space, and they have multiple shooters and everything, and the overhead is so high that's horrifying.
Well, I think this just goes to show you that the panic is really starting to set in with everyone. I think we've been feeling it a little bit more than most people in the States because we've been stuck inside for days now. We've been hearing, we'll be fined or jailed if we go outside. We got text from somebody today saying they were out jogging and police said we're going to take you to jail unless you go home immediately. But people in the States that I talk to who aren't freaking out are just kind of like going into work and doing, even my parents, my dad was like, oh, I'm going to go up and see our vacation house that's states away, just because he wanted to see it for a few days. And I talked to him today.
He's selling the vacation home?
He just bought it like a week ago. It was like the worst timing ever, ever. But he's like, I think I might have to get back to Jacksonville soon because people are talking about highways being shut down and like police barricading everyone in from moving around.
Before we get onto that topic, I do have something to say about that. One of the reasons I was up late last night at 3:30 was I was talking to a good photographer friend of ours who runs another website similar to what Fstoppers is. And he's much more analytical than we are in terms of the back end. And one of the areas that
this is not who you guys think it is.
Not who you think it is. He was just talking about Google Ads. And he was saying, he called me kind of in a panic and he said, have you seen what Google Ads are doing? And I'm like, no. And he says, every time this year, historically, Google Ads go up. They pay out more to have advertisements on your website because all the companies have new they all have new products, spring sales, like the economy's kind of going right after Christmas, sometime in March. And he said the Google Ads now, and I confirmed this with our stats, used to be $2 or $3 per 1,000 impressions. They have dropped now to 50 cents. But in January, they were about $1. So in January, they were already quite a bit down, right? But now they are at 50 cents an impression. And so his concern is, I don't know that, I have very little overhead running a blog, but all of my advertising money that keeps the website going is totally shut down. And he's just seeing analytics from a back end that most of the general public would not know. Like, how would you know how advertising in the world is doing? Like, most people would have no idea. They wouldn't have their finger on that pulse. And so I was like, oh man, this is kind of scary because that's what we do. And so I looked at our numbers and sure enough, like it has dropped significantly.
So something else that's dropping significantly are affiliate payments. So there's basically 3 ways that our website makes money, and that's Google ads or banner ads. It's affiliate links. So if we mention a camera and we link it to B&H or an Amazon and you buy it, it doesn't cost you any more, but we get a very small percentage of that sale. And then our tutorials that we sell on fstoppers.com/store, which I have been afraid to even look at those numbers. Have you looked at those numbers recently?
No.
I assume they're down. I'm not that worried about it. But
David back home thinks everything's chucking along pretty well. Like we're good.
Yeah. So some of our writers, all of our writers are photographers, and all of their jobs are gone 100%. Like, this was one of the first industries to go 100%. Yep. So they're like, well, at least I have this writer position for Fstoppers, so I'm just going to write more for Fstoppers. And we're like, great, we're happy to have you do that. But I just wrote a post that said, hey, just want to let you guys know, like, you guys know how we make money, but we're watching the numbers deteriorate quickly. If all of a sudden nobody's buying Google ads anymore, then that's the money that we take to pay our writers, and that's the only reason these blog posts can get made day after day after day. So just keep in mind, like, obviously we'll pay you for anything, but just keep in mind, if this keeps going really bad, situation. We're not going to be able to have everybody write 5 or 10 times more than they normally write, just because the money's not there. And David, our manager guy, was like, you don't need to be saying that. Like, of course, like, look at the numbers. Like, of course we can have as many posts as people want to write. And I'm like, right now, yes.
Yeah.
Right now, yes. But it just doesn't seem like it's going to keep up. What type of companies are going to be buying Google ads if we have been locked in our homes for a month?
Yeah.
What type? Maybe just products that you could literally have mailed to your house.
Yeah.
But our car company is going to be keeping up the ads. I just don't see that
Ford
happening.
might be going bankrupt. Do you think they're spending billions of dollars on advertising through all these blogs? And it's through YouTube as well. Like, these videos are demonetized because of the topics we're talking about, and they don't really fit advertising models. But ads in general on YouTube are just going down. I should have looked that number up. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Usually you make about $1,000 per million views, which is nothing.
Yeah.
So this video would have probably made like $20 maybe. I don't know.
At best.
But so yeah, it's interesting to hear what's happening in very specialized sectors to get a better picture, because you either really have to dig deep to find that, or you have to listen to the media. They're not going to talk about advertising. Like, that's not going to be something that hits the media.
Right.
One reader, speaking of the media, I'll just read this. One reader said that we should read more outside media, not just the United States.
I tried to do that.
And I
but
thought
go
that
ahead.
was so good. And
Yeah.
my only suggestion is there's only so much time in the day, and I'm already so exhausted. But I have to say, one thing I love about traveling abroad is, you know, when you're in, we've been to so many countries, but when you're in places like Dubai or New Zealand, especially the further east you go, I love watching the local news if it's in English, because you get to see the United States. I mean, usually no one's even talking about the United States, right? Nobody cares about the United States for the most part. But when they do talk about the United States, or they talk about other world players that we have kind of a negative view, like Russia, the views sometimes are wildly different than what we're exposed to here in America. And I find that so refreshing. You know, to us, it's like China is undermining our jobs and Russia is just trying to manipulate the United States. But that's pretty much all we ever hear about those two countries. You're never going to hear about anything good coming out of China and Russia. And so I just want to tell that reader, I totally agree with you, but I don't know how much more. I think tomorrow I'm going to take like a sabbatical. I'm just going to like take a break.
Do you want to go ahead and say for sure you are not going to look at any news tomorrow? I mean, tomorrow's Saturday, so the stock market's not open. You don't have to worry about your
That would
money.
make it a lot easier. Sure. I mean, I'm going to look at something, but I don't think I'm going to sit at my desk and just kind of
I think you
digest.
should try to stay off the news, stay off TV, unless you're watching a movie or TV show, and stay off Reddit. Like you got to get off Reddit.
I've been off
man.
Reddit for like 4 days. Like,
Okay.
I don't even go on Reddit
I'm
anymore.
on Reddit hours every day reading the craziest stuff ever.
I'm reading a lot of the links people are sending in the discussion. So the hard thing is if I get off of media tomorrow, I'm not going to read the comments from this video itself.
Well, here's what we could do tomorrow. You could go off of everything tomorrow and just have a sabbatical.
And
just
you
like,
tell me all the numbers?
Yeah, in the next video that we film tomorrow, I will kind of let you know what's been going on, and you can tell us if you feel better, because you don't look good right now. I know you're not
These
happy.
lights are hot. Our viewers also said we got to wear pants.
Yeah,
so I'm hot in pants. It's the daytime, so the air conditioner in this room isn't as low. I'm a little warm, but
Yeah.
I checked my temperature last night, and I was actually a degree or two lower than what I did a couple days ago. So I feel like I'm good.
Okay.
All right, another thing a lot of people were discussing, and we were really discussing, was Singapore.
Yeah.
And so I watched a video, I think it was recommended either in one of our WhatsApp groups or from our viewers. And it's basically a doctor saying what Singapore has done right. And in this video, he says, one, it's a small island, so it's kind of like Puerto Rico, but you know, I think it's connected, but Singapore basically acts as an island. They have contact tracing that they did right away, so as soon as they identified somebody that had the virus, they went back and figured out exactly how they got it.
Okay.
They did a lot of social distancing, like the people there just did it.
Okay.
Everyone wears a mask. There's no like, oh, the mask doesn't really work because the particles are too small. And no, everybody wears a mask. If you have it or don't have it, or you don't know if you have it, it's some sort of barrier there.
Okay.
They have separate entrances into their hospitals. So if you come down with coronavirus, you will be taken into another part of the hospital so you do not infect
Smart.
the main part of the hospital. And they do testing right there on site. And now I don't know with the testings. We've read that some of these take like days to get back. Maybe that's because we're shipping them out. But it looks like in Singapore, they're telling their patients to stay there until we run this test. And you will get it back maybe in 4 or 5 hours, but like that's what you do. And one of the reasons that this seems to have worked is that they had a big population, I guess, of people that got SARS, or they were at least scared of SARS 10 or 12 years ago, whenever that happened. And so all of this was implemented into Singapore in preparation for the outbreak. And what's really interesting, at least from some of the videos I've seen, it seems like people are still going to work. They got the masks on, they're sanitizing their hands and washing their hands, they're social distancing themselves, but they are still going into cubicles and working, and like it seems like people are kind of out and about. I need to see more videos on like the social element of it, but what that's doing is it's preventing their economy, in theory. We don't know yet, but like our theory is if we distance everybody and make everyone go into their homes, our economy is going to crash, and that's what's happening. But in Singapore, it seems like they're still getting some kind of work done, and perhaps their economy might hurt a lot less than other countries they just put everybody in straight up quarantine.
Well, one conspiracy theory that I have heard.
Uh-oh. I got a lot of trouble for my last one.
I know, like, guys, keep in mind, we are just talking about stuff that we've heard. This is not the news.
I don't even want to call it a
giving you
conspiracy theory. Like,
advice.
at this point, I just want to say it's like a hypothesis somebody has. It's like a thought somebody had that hopefully is based in some amount of science. But go ahead.
It was just about China. Like, you know, you keep hearing that China has it under control, and maybe yesterday they said it was the first day that they have no new cases from their country, and maybe they had 10 or 12 cases, but they said it's all from people flying in. So China is claiming they have it completely under control. And you hear that Starbucks are opening back up in China and everything, which sounds...
Apple is back up in China.
Okay, yeah, you hear these crazy things. So that all sounds great. Well, some people on Reddit were showing websites with live feeds of traffic cameras.
I've seen this, like TomTom.
And they're at like 2%. The traffic's at like 2% of where it should be. And then other people are saying that China is turning on factories to make it appear that they're being productive, but the factories are not producing CO2, which is something that NASA can monitor. Like maybe there's websites you can go to and monitor CO2 usage by country or region. I don't know. But basically the theory is that China is acting like everybody's fine and back to work, but they're not. Now, I don't think South Korea is like that. But my fear...
Singapore, but South Korea
it was
too.
Singapore that you mentioned earlier.
But
okay.
South Korea,
okay.
I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of what they've done, but they have also done a lot of testing, and I think they have it under control as well too. But it definitely hit South Korea more. Singapore is reporting 0 deaths, which I do not understand how that's possible.
Right.
You would think somebody
Singapore is such a hub. People are flying in and out of there so much.
Yeah, and you would think Singapore, like, no matter how quickly you caught it, like, somebody would at least die because...
And they've got those communal cafeteria outdoor food marts that are just packed full of people and pig organs and everything. Like, I don't know. You'd think it would spread there, but obviously Singapore's got great hygiene and sanitation and everything. But my fear with all of these countries who claim that they have it under control is that
the next note that I have written here.
Okay, is like what next? What do you do now? Do you just social distance forever?
Yeah.
Because if Italy gets hit hard with this, but then they get over it, now Italy can really get back to work. But is Singapore going to ban Italians from coming to Singapore?
It sounds like they are banning all travel. Like, you cannot come into the country.
So
and if you do, they have to like put you in quarantine like systematically for 14 days, and maybe this quarantine period is going to increase. It might be like 20 days. I don't know for certain. If we know, once you're over the virus, let's say you get it, like how long after that are you good to go back into society?
Right.
So if you want to go to Singapore, I mean, this is what the photographer friend of mine that I talked to last night was saying. He was leaving the Middle East. I won't say where, so you can't figure out who he is. But he was just saying, like, they were telling them if he ever wants to come back to that country, you're going to have to be quarantined for like 15 days, and you're going to have to pay for it, you know, thousands of dollars to be in a hotel room while they monitor you, and then eventually they will let you in. That's what immigration is going to start looking like.
So I watched a YouTube video yesterday, and it looked like some sort of audiophile YouTube channel. I don't know if you have watched this guy in the past.
You got to tell me more about it.
He reviews speakers and stuff, it seems like. But kind of like us.
Produce like a pro?
I don't know.
Is he a producer and he's telling you about...
No, not that guy.
Okay.
But he has the coronavirus. And so he has started making videos, again, that have nothing to do with what his YouTube channel does, just because that's all there is to make. And so he's been talking about the whole process of like what it's been like having it, and he's finally getting over his symptoms, and he's about ready to get back to work. I don't know what state he was in, but he said for him to be released from his own self-quarantine, the state wants him to take 2 separate coronavirus tests on 2 individual days, and if both come back negative,
then he's free to leave.
Then he's free. But the last test he took still came back positive. So his symptoms have gone, but he's still testing positive for it.
You're talking about him, and I'm just wondering. So I haven't watched this yet, but David Higgs, the photographer I mentioned before, has now Day 9 since the symptoms.
My cough has subsided a lot. I'm having a little bit of breathing issues, but nothing too bad. Just in terms of like my mate Monty dropped off some food yesterday, and bringing it up my stairs, I kind of ran out of breath, and sort of trying to explain something to my parents on the phone, I ran out of breath. From what I can tell, that kind of seems like the final symptom.
I was wrong. He was not in the United States. He's an Australian photographer. So when you talked about Peter Hurley coming from Australia to New York, David is actually in Australia. So he was not, I thought he was from LA. But speaking of LA, last night, LA, we started getting all the text messages from other photographer friends. They are now in a 24/7 lockdown just like we are.
And at the beginning, it was a little bit more lenient. It was like, you can still go outside, just don't like hang out in groups and don't talk to people. Has that changed? I saw a text from Pi saying that you can no longer go outside now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really been keeping up with that side of the story.
Let's see, I think
but I say LA, I mean, it's the state of California. It's all of California is under this lockdown. And what's super ironic to me is many of these friends that we have in LA and some of the friends that I virtual friends with in the investing group, they all have buddies who are like, I'm getting text messages from these people saying, how in the world do I buy a gun? Like when I think of California, I think of the most liberal state that like wants gun control, right? That doesn't mean everybody's like that, but that's kind of what I think in my mind. And they're saying Washington, Seattle, all these places, like I've heard of gun stores shutting down. It's like pandemonium is starting to set in, you know? And in the South, I just kind of feel like, man, everybody's got guns. Like I might not have a gun in my house, but people have guns all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I feel more or less safe because of that, but it's just the gun culture in the South is just a different thing. But to see this happening now in California is pretty wild. Are they on lockdown?
So
are they able to take walks and
Pi
exercise?
did not send me a link, but he says, well, we're now going to be fined if we're out. So
Okay.
I don't know exactly what that means. I cannot confirm that. I have not seen that headline yet,
Yeah.
but
So speaking of lockdown, another kind of rumor that I've heard a lot today from friends, and many of these people, you know, it's tricky because it's like a friend of a friend, or it's like my friend's brother said this to me. And I remember Sarah Londo, the friend that we have, photographer in northern Italy, she goes through all the stages of what this is like to go through it. And she's like, you'll get to a point where like everyone has some insider information. I have a doctor in Seattle who, you know, and I have a friend of the CDC, and I've heard from, so I take this all with a grain of salt, but I'm seeing this over and over in very private groups that people are saying their family members are getting told by, you know, the National Guard that we are about to make a big move. Now that big move could be, we're going to start setting up all of these tents and parking lots to help serve people. But I think the fear that a lot of people have is that the National Guard is actually going to start going into big cities and telling people, you have to get in your house. Like, we're not going to find, maybe they'll find you, but we're not going to arrest you because where are you going to put all these people, right? And so this martial law sort of thing is definitely a big fear. And now I think I saw a headline about your boy Como, who just in yesterday's video, you said, what in the world is he going to say when he tells everybody that you have to stay in your house? Is New York now toying with being on lockdown?
On the businesses, on the valve, we reduced it to 50% of the workforce. We then reduced it to 75% of the workforce must stay home. And today we're bringing it to 100% of the workforce must stay home. These are non-essential services. Essential services have to continue to function. Grocery stores need food, pharmacies need drugs, your internet has to continue to work, the water has to turn on when you turn the faucet. So there are essential services that will continue to function, but 100% of the workforce.
Yeah, so I see Kumo. This is a text that Pi sent me just a second ago. Kumo orders all non-essential New York workers to stay home. That is still not the lockdown that he swore he would never do yesterday.
Okay, but he is like one step closer to that.
Yeah.
All non-essential workers should go home. That's basically what California kind of said, maybe
Yeah.
without the lockdown. That's the next layer. And then the final layer is we're going to fine you if you leave. Because they kind of did that here. They did it within a 2-hour period. You're locked down, but guess what? You can go out, exercise, and do all this stuff. And then 2 hours later, it's like, guess what? You can't do anything. There was a curfew, and then there was a lockdown.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably coming to America, especially when you see these numbers. When in 5 days, we just quadrupled the number of deaths. You know, like that's not sustainable.
No, it's not. And I guess, you know, especially in big cities, if people just want to go outside and jog or walk their dog, it shouldn't be a big deal. But maybe if everyone's doing it,
Yeah.
you're going to run into somebody you know and start having a conversation. And if that's how it spreads, then maybe
And
you
we
do
have
to
friends in
stop
New York, and there's some of them that are texting us saying like, yeah, I'm working from home, but I've gotten out of the city. I went an hour north and got out of Manhattan, you know, and it's like I probably would do that too, you know, if I had the means, if I had an uncle or a family
Yeah.
member or something where I could do that.
Yeah, I keep thinking every day. It's like, where do I want to be?
Yeah.
The worse this gets, and you know, talking about how the panic is really starting to set in with people. I mean, we're watching people on our WhatsApp groups here start to go crazy, and I don't want to say turn on each other and stuff, but everybody, you know, somebody will be outside jogging, and then people will be like, somebody's jogging past my window, and I have a sick grandmother, and
Yeah.
well, you know, and it's like, we need to get the police in here to get these people, and I don't think that's helpful. And then one of my buddies here actually has a family member in another country who tested positive for this. And I'm pretty sure 3 or 4 days ago, he was like, Lee, come on, man. Like, it's just a flu. It's maybe a little worse. It's not a big deal. He had a family member who had it. I saw him today. I went to the grocery store in our neighborhood, and he was like, what are we going to do when people haven't worked in 2 months here in Puerto Rico? What happens then? And I said, that's what I've been worried about this whole time. And I said, I assume that Trump's helicopter money does not come to Puerto Rico because Puerto Ricans do not pay federal income tax.
Yeah.
So what the heck happens? But I would imagine no matter what happens, like we've said before, it's still not as bad as Maria.
Yeah, because that's always my fear is what happens when the locals, I mean, anybody, not just Puerto Rico, but anywhere in the United States.
Anywhere.
What happens when people who are desperate become even more desperate?
Yeah.
And your counter argument here in Puerto Rico is that nothing could be worse than Maria. Everyone was the most desperate, without power, without energy, without cell service,
Water.
like, and it seems like Puerto Ricans kind of came together and like rose out of the situation, which is really exciting. But yeah, I don't know, and we've talked to other locals about, you know, casually about, you know, the 2008 market crash and did you lose money in your property and stuff, and many people are just like, I never really noticed. Like, island life is such a relaxing life, and you're not burdened by so much of the rat race that you have in America that, you know, if you own your house and it's generational, you're in a house that you've been in, your family's been in for 5 or 6 generations. If you own that, then you just stay there with your family, and it's more family oriented and everything. So,
and I have one friend whose rent is $300 per month.
Yeah.
So he's like, as long as I make $300 per month, I'm good
Yeah.
to go. So it's a very different mentality. So if that's the majority of people, then we're going to be great. And Puerto Rico is probably the best place on the planet to be. But I'm starting to see people in the States now starting to freak out how they weren't a day or two ago. And I think it's only going to get worse.
I had a phone call with a friend who was saying that, very big world traveler, and he was saying that he is worried about like grains and food and shortages and starvation. And I'm like, all right, come on. And he was like, no, hear me out. Like, China produces and Asia produces, like, I'm just making up a number, but it was like 70% of all rice comes out of Asia. And what do you start doing when South America is hit and we're not able to ship stuff to them and they're not able to ship with us, and all of a sudden your trade stops? And he was talking about, like, he was in Petra, you know, like in the Middle East. And he was just saying that, like, all of the income in some of these touristy places, these world wonders of the world, the people only survive there because of tourism. I mean, we have a friend who's a tuk-tuk driver in Cambodia. Nobody is at Angkor Wat right now being a tourist. And you start to think, well, what? Luckily, they have the rice fields and stuff there. But what happens when everybody, like the lowest money-making people in the world, like people like that are on the brink of poverty. What do they do when the one little thing that they have, which in many cases is tourism, is completely dried up for a year? It very easily could be, you know?
Absolutely.
And so I haven't really gone down that road yet, and I haven't really thought about the economic impacts of that, but I'm starting to hear about it. I'm starting to hear where people say that's actually the biggest fear, you know? Like a week ago, the biggest fear was the stock market crashes. And what does that mean for Wall Street? And then what does that mean for homeowners? But as this goes on, it's going to be like, who cares about the stock market and who cares about your house? It's how are people making the basic means work for them and their family, you know?
Right.
It has the possibility for that. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but no one living has seen anything like this. They claim to. People are like, oh, I've been through whatever, and, you know,
Well, you know,
polio outbreaks and stuff, but you're like, this is a whole different level.
maybe polio was actually much worse, but because they didn't have the internet and the ability to quarantine, you never had the ability to.
But maybe that's why it was
freak
much
out.
worse. It's kind of like when you think of, Kristen told me yesterday, she's like, this feels like we're preparing for a hurricane. And I was like, that's exactly what this feels like. But in today's technology, we know where the hurricane is, and we know it's a Category 3 right off the coast, and it could hit as a 2, it could hit as a 5. But we know every minute, like, what they're telling us. But imagine if you had no idea there was a hurricane there.
You'd never want to
and you're
live
like,
near the
oh, it looks
water.
like it's starting to get overcast today, and then like in 12 hours, you're
I
like,
know.
oh my gosh, I'm not prepared at all. Right. And I feel like that's what diseases were like 100 years ago, but even just before social media.
Right.
We didn't have all the, I mean, I'm able to see what Singapore is doing, which is really pretty cool.
So let's quickly talk about the stock market and kind of your thoughts on that. Today,
I haven't really looked at the market.
it was
a whole lot.
relatively flat today, and then towards the end of the day, it dropped off, and the S&P is down 4.3% today. I, like many people, you know, am very panicked that, you know, we're heading into a depression and not just a recession.
Yep.
So far, we're probably down around 25-30% total, which really isn't that bad. We're only around where we were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That's how much of a crazy bull run we've had.
Have we decreased more than when Trump took office?
No. Okay, so right now we are 1.23% up from when Trump took office on January 1st, around January 1st, 2017. So if you think of it like that, we're hardly down at all. Like we're back where we were 3 years ago, you know, a little bit up from where we were 3 years ago. If you had to sell everything and be like, oh, I lost 3 years of gains, that's nothing. That's nothing.
It's basically like just saying I had my money in a bank account.
Yeah, exactly.
All my cash sat in a bank account, which is what probably most people do.
Right.
A lot of people aren't into the stock market, and they don't even trust it. They don't want to invest in the stock market.
So you go on to these forums or you watch MSNBC and all these money people talking, and some people are saying, we feel like this, you know, we're getting close to the bottom. We can't predict the bottom, but you might want to start putting your money back in. And then other people are saying, are you insane? Like we're dropping to 70% down.
Yeah.
Like there's no way this is the bottom. And so someone like me, who has been saying for years that I was waiting for a moment like this to jump back in the market, I am now too afraid to do it.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say, I am brilliant, and I have made the
No.
wisest decision ever.
No, I mean, only time will tell. You know, I have
Yeah.
to put the money back in eventually to be proven right or wrong. But I still feel like I want to be in a short position right now because I feel like it's going to keep going down. So I had a buddy over today who was teaching me about stock options.
Had a buddy over.
He's clean.
Somebody came in here?
Yeah, somebody came in
Oh
here.
boy.
And so he's giving me like a little options lesson, and he's telling me how much money he has in options right now, which is huge sums of money. And I'm like, how long have you learned how to do these options? And he's like, a week. Like so he's showing me, and I'm asking him how it works and what these details are, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know what any of the stuff means. But he's like, I've already made 10 grand because, you know, everything keeps dropping. So I just keep doubling down on these, you know, bets that the market's
It's
going
crazy.
to
Do you
to
remember?
crash.
You remember when we were in Rome, and we learned about Wall Street bets because some guy with a wolf head mask made a crazy bet on Apple.
The final YOLO or something
The
like
final YOLO. And now Wall Street Bets is like, it's as big as, it's probably one of the largest subreddits on Reddit, right?
Yeah, so basically the premise is, if you go to this subreddit, it's a bunch of probably kids like in their 20s who are basically just gambling with huge sums of money in the stock market, doing these put and call options where you're basically just betting that the stock will wildly go up or down within very short periods of time. And the funny thing about this subreddit is that they pride themselves on not knowing what they're doing.
And also losing money.
Yeah.
Like, if you make money, it's like you're doing it wrong.
And if you ask questions about how it works and the details, you will get shamed.
Yeah.
People will say, you need to be banned, and like, what are you trying to do? Learn about this? Like, just put your money in and roll the dice. And it's this wild cultural thing that's going on right now with young people. I mean, including us. I've never been into stock options before, but it's all I hear about now. So I'm like, I got to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is another way people lose all their money. It's like you might have lost your money anyway because you're losing your job. You might have lost your money anyway because the stock market's going down. Now you're definitely going to lose your money because you're gambling it all on a single bet that you don't even fully understand.
It's totally a bet. You're not investing at all. Like, you're not saying, hey, Amazon's going to work through this because they're hiring more employees and everyone's stuck at home. They're going to do delivery and whatever. You're just like...
You're like, I think Amazon's going to go up tomorrow because they went down so much today.
Yeah.
Like, that's what people are doing on this website. And that's what a lot of people I know are currently doing as well. And I don't think it's going to end well.
Well, I have simplified the whole process, and I have bought an ETF. This shows how much I know, right? I can't even get the initials out. SPXU or SPXS.
Okay.
And these are leveraged, which is horrifying, meaning that they do 3 times the volume. So if it goes up, you lose 3 times as much money, and if it goes down, you gain 3 times as much money. And the reason you gain money when it goes down is it's inverse of the S&P 500.
So today, if the S&P went down 4%, did you make 12% on your money?
I'm up 13.8%.
Okay.
I bought that late yesterday. The market rebounded. And when I bought it, it's totally a guess, right? I have no idea. But I just keep thinking this next week. I think I said this yesterday. I've probably been saying it every day we've been sitting here. I think this next week is the big moment for America. Like, the numbers just quadrupled. And I think, like, we're about to see how bad it is. And with it being a weekend, I feel like no good news is going to come out of the weekend. When that market opens on Monday, sometimes it's like up and down the last few weeks. It's been a roller coaster ride, but I do not see this next week being good at all. I think it's going to be horrifying. And so I'm hoping that this leverage bet, which I don't do this stuff ever, but I just feel like, man, the market's got to go down. Like, it's going to scare Wall Street scare your Wall Street bet people to where they finally start saying, you know what? If this is really for real, I need some money in savings, But I'm part of the culture now too, I guess. So YOLO. What is the phrase? My tendies?
Exactly. You're going to be able to buy some tendies.
All right. So we talked a little bit about the stock market. Is there anything else you want to say with the market?
Don't think so.
So yesterday I showed a video of a guy claiming that this virus potentially could have been genetically engineered in a lab. And I understand where the video came from, and some people don't like the host of the video, and they're saying it's propaganda, and he's a super right-wing guy, and that this is, how dare you put this on the channel? And I'm just saying, my rebuttal is just, I want to see the code. Like, somebody please publish the genetic code of both the coronavirus and the other viruses that we have mapped, and just compare what this guy's talking about. You could disprove this so easily if it's not true, right? I think that would be really interesting. Instead, there's some articles from the medical community that are saying, not a rebuttal to this guy specifically, but they're just saying that this virus is not man-made. And I'm like, well, isn't that what you should tell everybody? Like, if you can't possibly tell people at this moment that this is a genetically engineered virus, people would freak out. And if you said it has the parts of the HIV virus in it, people would freak out, right? So I guess my thought was just, I wish somebody, and hopefully somebody will write that in the link, somewhere where you can actually find the actual raw code, and then maybe a processor or something where you could like throw the 2 codes in and it'll show you how much. They're going to be 99% identical, right? Just because that's...
I don't know what the heck. genetic code of
Our
a
genetic code from like an
virus
ape is like 99% the same, right? But it's
Okay.
different enough to where if you commit a crime, they can distinguish your code from mine. So there are changes in DNA.
Okay.
I would just really be interested in that. But to be fair, I have been watching some videos that have been recommended to us in the comments of the last video. And there's a guy named Nathan Rich who is an American living in China. And again, could be propaganda. But he has a conspiracy theory. And I want to be fair because it's like the other side. And I'll put the two, you can put some of it in right now, but I'll put the links below. He has a conspiracy theory that this was actually manufactured in a lab here in West Virginia or Maryland.
You know, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories going around about this COVID-19 outbreak. Some of them have to do with the military games that took place in Wuhan in October of 2019. And some other ones have to do with vaping in America. And one that may seem even more far-fetched has to do with a medical research laboratory that was closed down in America in August. But how could a military medical research center being closed down in August have anything to do with an outbreak? I mean, it's not like there was an outbreak of a mystery respiratory illness that was causing pneumonia immediately in the vicinity of that facility right before they closed it down or anything. No, there wasn't one. There were two.
It's a really crazy video and it's short. It's like 5 minutes. But he has a timeline on when the CDC shut down this American research facility. And it all revolves around U.S. vaping. And I remember a year ago, you're just saying, oh my gosh. I remember a year ago hearing overnight that vaping now is the worst thing you could possibly do. It's worse than cigarettes and the government might ban it. And I was like, what? I always thought vaping was like the best alternative to smoking cigarettes. I've kind of thought for 15 years, maybe we should get all smokers that are burning carcinogens into their lungs at least over to vaping, because that has to be better for them, right? Cigarettes kill like 8 million people a year. Cigarettes at this moment are way more deadly than coronavirus at this moment. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
This won't age well. So anyway, he brings all of this up, and all of these cases start coming out where suddenly the CDC and the president is saying we have to ban all of these cartridges because people are getting these respiratory problems in their lungs and it's eating their lungs away and they're dying in like 15 days. And I remember my dad being like, you better not have any of that vaping stuff because, you know, people are dying from vaping. And I was just like, this is the weirdest left field news story ever. And I remember this happening. It happened in like July.
No, I remember this. Yeah.
Well, he has tied it all into this video of these people may have been getting it from bad vaping cartridges from China. I think that's what the government said.
That's what I remember the story.
Or these people might have just been vapors because a lot of young people vape. And they actually just got the coronavirus then. And this guy has like CT scans and it looks identical. Like, you know, I can't read a CT scan, but when he shows some of the stuff that we're concerned with coronavirus, and then he shows what the CT scans look like from these people vaping, it's like cutting holes into the lungs the same ways that SARS does.
But hold on. If any of this is true, first of all, the people who were dying were young in the vaping story, if I remember. And that's why the president was like, we have to ban vaping.
In Maryland, within a 2-hour drive of this facility that has been shut down by the CDC, there are nursing homes where mass amounts of people have died. Like 10 or 12 people died in a nursing home from an unexplained pneumonia type thing. And I know it's crazy and I can't explain it well enough here. I'm just going to put the links below, and I feel like this is fair. It's conspiracy, I know. It's another theory.
Yeah.
But it's the counter argument to the one that I showed yesterday.
Yeah.
And the older I get, I do start to believe that America isn't necessarily as innocent or as moral as we always like to believe that it is, right? And I'm not beyond believing that maybe this was made in America or America had their hand in it in some way. And from some of the people I'm talking to that have family in the Far East, they've been saying that Russian media has been saying for 4 months, that this is some kind of manufactured thing from China. I don't know if they're saying it's from America, but apparently China now, in the news even, is starting to say, this came from America. Like this weird pointing of fingers is happening.
Yeah.
And it's way under the surface. It's kind of hinted at in some of the press releases with Trump talking about the Chinese virus and it's their virus. Like, it's very subtle, and maybe it really doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's there, and I don't think the mainstream media is ever going to pick up on this. This is kind of like 9/11's an inside job type of stuff. I realize that. But at the same time, we in America are conditioned to say that Russia's news is not to be trusted at all. But then when you go to Dubai, or you go to Singapore, or you go to Hong Kong, like, people watch, like, Russian news is actually on their television. I don't even think we get it in America.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, a lot of people around the world are digesting Russian news. Like, it can't all be wrong.
Right.
And so it kind of goes back to the guy who made the comment of, like, you guys need to read more news stories from outside of America. And this is one where, again, it could be as much propaganda as the video I showed before. But again, I just feel like the video I showed yesterday, just show the genetic code, and let's compare those segments that make HIV really deadly and see if it's exactly the same, peptide by peptide, in the coronavirus. It'd be very easy to prove that one wrong. I, as somebody who dabbled in biology years ago, I'd find that really interesting. And I think we should demand more from our leaders. We should demand more answers, and we should have these things published. Like when articles are being removed from scientific journals, it just feels weird that, like, we can't have access to that.
What has been removed from a scientific journal? I feel like I should not have asked you that question, but what are you talking about?
The article yesterday, the video yesterday, the guy was just claiming that there was a scientific article published in India that was the first thing that kind of pointed to the SARS being manipulated in a lab. And that got pulled. They, like, redacted it. And so the idea is, like, why did it get redacted? And he just said that the methodology of their testing wasn't right. But he's saying it looks, I mean, you're just comparing peptides, right? He's claiming that it doesn't hold up to the dogma of what scientists want. Because you're paid, if you're a researcher, you're paid based on what your research produces. So if you are a researcher and your research starts showing that, like, iPads are killing us because of, like, electric frequencies, that company, that institution may say, you know what, like, we got our funding from Apple. We don't want you to continue down this road.
Sure.
I mean, imagine if you're Philip Morris. Like, you might say, hey, our research is showing this. We can't be publishing that if we know it.
Yep.
And you go down these conspiracy theories. I mean, the big one that's happening right now, this isn't a conspiracy theory, is that many of our politicians in Congress knew about this crash coming. They knew how bad it was, and they sold all their stock options a month ago. Like, this stuff's happening where government officials know way more than they let us onto. And now it's this whole thing of, like, are we going to punish them? I feel like we should. It's no different than what Martha Stewart did. It's no different with what we would do if we sold with inside information somehow. If we worked for a company and they told us this virus is going to destroy the economy, maybe like that's what happened in Congress. But if we knew that Apple was going to miss their mark because no one even knew that a new iPad was released 2 days ago, and we worked for Apple and we were given that information in confidentiality, we could go to jail for that. And so these things are happening behind the scenes, and I'm just always a little skeptical to just believe the full story that we're being sold right now. That's all I'm saying, and I thought it would be fair to share a story that is in the complete opposite direction, that says America is actually to blame for this.
But
and,
it's an equivalent level of insanity. I don't know what's true. I don't even want to comment on these crazy conspiracies.
The nice thing with this video is the guy admits the things that don't make sense in his theory.
Okay.
And I feel like very few people do that.
Yeah.
Very few people are honest and say, well, wait a minute, why is coronavirus not worse in America than it is in China if it actually started here back in June? And you're like, yeah, exactly. That's a good thing. But I don't know. Watch the video, especially if you're quarantined. This one's very short, so I'm done with my conspiracy theories for the day. I don't know if I'm going to share any more because I don't know if people like this. I kind of find it interesting, but the more people I call physically on the phone and have conversations with, the more some of this stuff is opening up, and I feel like the one who's like, wait a minute, I got to draw a line somewhere.
I feel like this is the Joe Rogan podcast, and you are Eddie Bravo, and I'm going to have to start telling you, like, Patrick,
the world,
we can't talk about that, okay? Nobody wants to hear about that. I can't deal with it. Let's just talk about jiu-jitsu because I can't hear about all your crazy conspiracies.
The world is still round. I believe that. I think we landed on the moon.
Today you believe that.
I believe that, but, you know.
Wait till you hear that vape pens were filled with coronavirus. You're going to realize the earth is flat.
All I know with the vape pens is I remember thinking that story was strange when it happened.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It disappeared. I think they banned it for like a month or something, and then I think they lifted the ban. Like, it was a weird story.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, man, the government is getting their hands in here and, like, banning vape pens. Is that, like, Philip Morris, like, manipulating the market, you know, and saying, oh, cigarette sales are down, we got to get rid of the vape pens? I just thought something weird was going on there, and then it just totally disappeared. And nobody is tracking people with vape pens. Are people dying by vaping now? Or...
I will not comment on this. This is so insane.
I will leave you with a video somebody sent me, and you'll find this really interesting.
boy.
A lot of people probably know what this is. It's just called the Overton window. Overton, one word, Overton window. And watch that video. It's pretty eye-opening to me on like how politics kind of change the way people think and the psychology behind like how governments and people move from thinking one way to another way. The big prediction I might have is something is going to happen in policy. It has to. Our healthcare has to change at least through this process, right? All Americans are going to say, we can't let coronavirus ever happen again, and there will be a massive policy change. It's got to happen.
On that note,
I'll talk more on Sunday.
on that note, let's get out of here. I got to stop you while I still can.